Welcome to the debate. Imagine getting a $250,000 tax break on your home, right? You're celebrating the windfall only to check your bank accounts a year later. And, well, you realize your actual day-to-day cost of living didn't drop a single cent.
Yeah, that's a pretty harsh reality for a lot of people.
Exactly. Today, we are looking at Florida's 2026 property tax proposal, which is known as HJR 1F. We're actually using Broward County, Florida, as our local case study to unpack the collision between property taxes, municipal budgets, and public education funding.
Which is incredibly complex down there.
It really is, and it all comes down to one central question, right? Will Florida property tax reform reduce the burden or move the burden to another bill? I'll be taking the side of the everyday homeowner today. I'm arguing that this proposal offers mathematically sound, highly targeted, and frankly, absolutely necessary financial relief for residents who are currently being crushed by the rising costs of living.
And I will be taking the contrarian view here. I'll be exploring how this so-called relief is actually just a mechanism for shifting costs within a deeply complex system of layered taxation. Because without comprehensive structural accountability, what we might call a taxpayer receipt for the 99%, the actual education and municipal burden on the public remains fully intact. Okay, let's start by looking at the actual mechanics of what HJR 1F does, because the math here is pretty substantial. This is a proposed constitutional amendment heading to the November 2026 ballot.
Right.
If it is approved by 60% of voters, it creates a significantly expanded homestead exemption. Currently, the homestead exemption reduces the taxable value of your primary residence, which lowers your tax bill.
Basic Property Tax 101.
Exactly. But under HJR 1F, homeowners who are established Florida residents on or before December 31, 2026 would get a $150,000 exemption beginning in 2027. And then by 2028, that exemption scales up to a massive $250,000.
Wait, so what about new residents?
Good question. New residents who miss that initial cutoff, they would receive the existing base exemption for 4 years before they unlock that larger tier.
Well, that is definitely the headline the state wants you to focus on.
I mean, it's a good headline because it targets the right problem. Homeowners right now are facing skyrocketing insurance premiums, persistent inflation, and rising utility costs.
Sure, nobody's arguing that the cost of living isn't high.
Right. So by increasing the homestead exemption on the county and city side of the tax ledger, the state is providing direct bottom-line relief to the taxpayer. It lowers the taxable value of their home for municipal services, which mathematically has to result in a lower tax bill from the city and county.
It sounds incredibly appealing on paper, I'll give you that. But the defining feature of HJR 1F is actually what it explicitly excludes. The proposal applies strictly to non-school levies.
Right. The school board is carved out.
Exactly. School board property taxes are entirely carved out and protected from this relief. Your $250,000 exemption, it does not apply to the portion of your property tax that funds the local school district.
Which makes up a huge chunk of the bill.
Right. And because those education costs remain fully intact on the property tax bill, the total structural cost to the taxpayer does not drop in a meaningful way. Instead, what we are looking at is basically a masterclass in layered taxation.
Let's pause there. Explain what you mean by layered taxation in this context.
Yeah, so it means citizens are paying into the public education system multiple times across different mechanisms without seeing a genuine reduction in their overall burden. Like, you pay your local school property taxes, right?
Right.
Then you pay state sales taxes, a portion of which feeds the state education funding formula. Then you purchase lottery tickets under the premise of funding schools. Then you are asked to vote for local referendums.
And the private side, too.
Exactly. Increasingly, parents are paying out of pocket for private tuition or homeschool costs that aren't fully covered by state vouchers. If the system worked as promised, school taxes wouldn't need to be strictly insulated from a broad property tax relief bill.
Okay, you mentioned school taxes aren't dropping, and you're right. Actually, we need to do a quick fact-check break right here to clarify 2 baselines from the source material.
Go ahead.
First, the Florida lottery, which is, the first thing people point to when they ask why schools need more money. It supports education, but it does not fully fund education. And second, the current property tax proposal we're discussing, does not remove school taxes from the homeowner's bill.
Right, those are crucial distinctions.
Yeah, but let's look at the lottery piece. The lottery transfers billions into the Educational Enhancement Trust Fund. That money pays for Bright Future scholarships, it contributes to K-12 class size reduction requirements, and it supports workforce education. That is a real supplementary benefit that takes pressure off the local ledger.
I come at it from a different way. We have to look at the psychological promise made to the public versus the mathematical reality. When the Florida lottery was established, the fundamental promise to the public was that buying a ticket would alleviate the educational funding burden.
But the math never supported that.
Right. Because money is fungible. When the lottery generates $1 billion for education, the state can easily take $1 billion of general revenue out of the education budget and spend it on something else. The net increase to the classroom is often zero.
But, those lottery allocations are still covering specific statutory requirements. They're doing what they legally have to do.
They are, but look at our case study in Broward County. Homeowners are still stuck. The lottery money is real, yes, but because of that fungibility, homeowners in Broward are still paying their baseline school property taxes.
Yeah, and the reassessments hit them hard.
Exactly. When their home changes ownership, the assessed value resets, and they face massive tax hikes. And on top of all of that, the district continually goes back to the voters asking for local school referendums.
Like the operating millage.
Yeah, an extra operating millage, just to cover basic needs like teacher pay, school safety officers, and classroom technology.
The very existence of those local referendums proves my point. The overall burden was never actually lifted by the lottery. It just added another layer of taxation.
Look, I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. A supplementary fund like the lottery was never mathematically capable of covering the entire multi-billion-dollar operation of a state education system.
True. It's a massive system.
Right. It was designed to enhance, not replace. State public education is an enormously expensive endeavor, so keeping school taxes on the local ledger while offering a $250,000 exemption on the non-school side through HJR 1F is simply a recognition of economic reality.
A convenient reality for the state. But a necessary one. It protects the schools from catastrophic budget shortfalls while giving homeowners a desperately needed break on city and county taxes.
But if the tax burden isn't shrinking, we have to ask where those public dollars are actually going. This is where the structural shift in how Florida delivers education comes into play.
You're talking about the vouchers.
Yes. Through programs like the Family Empowerment Scholarship, the state has massively expanded vouchers, private school scholarships, and parent-directed programs. The driving philosophy is that the money follows the child.
Which gives parents choices.
Sure, but here's the mechanism that breaks the budget. When students move outside the district-managed public school system, those public dollars leave with them, yet the public costs remain entirely fixed.
Are you referring to the physical footprint of the school districts, the buildings and all that?
Exactly. Think about how a district builds a budget. If 50 students leave a high school in October to take a voucher to a private academy, the district loses the per-student funding for those 50 kids, but the district cannot shut off 10% of the air conditioning in the building.
Right. You can't partially cool a school.
Or fire half of principal. The transportation contracts, the insurance premiums, the debt service on the construction bonds, the security personnel, the roof maintenance, none of those costs disappear just because a percentage of the student body leaves.
And we're seeing that locally.
Yes, in Broward County, we are witnessing this paradox in real time. The district is facing severe funding pressures and declining enrollment, which leads directly to the closing, consolidating, and repurposing of neighborhood schools.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because, well, you are conflating an operational shift with a financial shell game. Let me offer an analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think of a city's public transit system, right? If a significant portion of the ridership decides to use government-subsidized vouchers to take private ride shares instead of the train, the city still has to maintain the existing train tracks.
Naturally.
They still have to pay the conductors, light the stations, and service the debt on the rail cars. That fixed cost reality doesn't mean the rideshare voucher is a scam, nor does it mean the city is hiding the money. It simply means that managing a transition is expensive.
That is a compelling argument, but have you considered how that plays out for the person actually paying the fare?
How so?
Well, in your transit analogy, The taxpayer is being asked to fund the private rideshare, continue fully funding the empty train, and then pay a premium for the station maintenance, all while the state tells them their transportation costs are going down.
I wouldn't call the train empty, but go on.
It's the illusion of relief. You argue that closing schools and consolidating in Broward County is just responsible right-sizing. I agree that it's necessary management given the enrollment drop. But while Broward is right-sizing, the taxpayer is not seeing a dividend from those closings.
Because the savings are reabsorbed?
Exactly. Because school board taxes are specifically excluded from HJR 1F, the taxpayer is funding the massive expansion of the voucher system, funding the fixed costs of the half-empty public buildings, and still paying the exact same school property tax rate.
But you are ignoring the other side of the ledger. That is the entire point of the $150,000 to $250,000 expanded homestead exemption. Homesteaded homeowners will absolutely see net relief on their bottom line for county and city services.
For the county side, maybe.
It's math. Let's look at the mechanism of a property tax bill. It's split between different taxing authorities. Even if the school board millage rate stays exactly the same, if your taxable value for municipal services drops by $250,000, your overall property tax bill goes down. It provides breathing room in a tight economy. You keep more of your own money.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You are looking exclusively at the homesteaded homeowner and assuming municipal finance exists in a vacuum. First of all, this framework completely ignores renters.
Well, they don't pay property tax directly.
But they pay it in their rent. A homestead exemption fundamentally bypasses the rental market because it only applies to a primary residence owned by the occupant. If a landlord's tax bill increases because of this amendment, assuming they even qualify for this specific homestead structure, which commercial apartment buildings won't, there is absolutely no mechanism forcing them to pass those savings down to the renter.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. Renters indirectly benefit from a stabilized housing market, you know?
How exactly?
Well, if landlords of single-family homes or smaller duplexes aren't hit with massive property tax increases year over year, it reduces the upward pressure on rent prices. They don't have to hike the rent just to cover their tax escrow.
In a tight rental market like South Florida, rents are determined by market demand, not by landlord benevolence or escrow stabilization. If the market dictates a unit can rent for $2,500 a month, the landlord will charge $2,500, regardless of whether their tax bill dropped by $800.
Supply and demand, sure.
But let's look at the municipal side, because this is where the real shell game happens. If local governments, like the cities and counties in Broward, suddenly lose massive amounts of ad valorem tax revenue because the state forced an expanded homestead exemption on them, what do?
They tighten their belts. They prioritize essential services.
No, they seek to replace the revenue. And the mechanism they use to replace it is incredibly regressive. Because they are legally constrained on property taxes, they will introduce new special assessments.
Like the garbage fees?
Exactly. They will raise garbage fees, water and sewer fees, and fire rescue assessments. These are flat fees attached to utility bills or non-ad valorem lines on the tax notice. And who pays those flat fees? Everyone, including the renters.
So the cost shifts.
Right. The cost doesn't vanish. It simply mutates. It moves from a visible property tax, which is based on the value of your home, to an invisible matrix of local flat fees that hit lower-income residents much harder. That is why I call this an illusion of relief. The burden isn't reduced, it is just moved to another bill.
Okay. I think we have to give local governments and, the voters who elect them more credit than that. Mayors and county commissioners are acutely accountable to their constituents.
Are they, though? In the face of budget deficits?
Yes. Raising utilities or special assessments aggressively to intentionally bypass the constitutionally mandated tax cut would result in tremendous political blowback. Voters aren't blind. If their property tax goes down, but their water bill triples, they will vote those local officials out. HJR 1F forces local governments to justify every single dollar they spend, just as working families have had to do with inflation.
But the sheer complexity of that funding matrix is exactly why voters are flying blind and why we need systemic transparency. We have spent this entire conversation diagnosing an incredibly convoluted system of layered taxation.
It is definitely convoluted.
We have school property taxes operating on one set of rules, state sales taxes feeding the education formula, lottery fungibility, local referendums, voucher funding, and now municipal flat fees acting as shadow taxes. It is an entanglement of public money designed to be incomprehensible to the average person.
And people just see the bottom line.
Right. So if we are going to navigate this properly, the 99%, the everyday working taxpayers, must demand actionable transparency before they agree to any more of these proposals.
On the need for transparency, we absolutely agree. The structural complexity we just outlined is exactly why a taxpayer receipt is no longer just a nice idea. It is an urgent operational necessity.
Glad we agree on that.
Yeah. If the state is going to ask voters to approve HJR 1F, or if districts like Broward are going to continue asking for more referendums, the public needs a unified, easily digestible dashboard. We need a statewide education dollar dashboard that rigorously tracks every single cent from collection to classroom. I'm talking about clear lines detailing lottery transfers, state education funding, local district funding, charter funding, and voucher funding.
Yes, but the dashboard can't just be a broad state-level summary. It has to be granular, and it has to expose the black boxes in the system. And right now, the biggest black box is the state voucher system.
You want localized data.
Exactly. We need a specific Broward taxpayer receipt. A homeowner should be able to log on and see exactly how much in school taxes was collected from their county, how much of that stayed in their neighborhood, and how much was redistributed by the state. They need to see exactly what portion of their local tax dollars followed a student into the private voucher system versus what stayed in the traditional district.
I mean, I would argue the traditional district is just as much of a black box. The administrative bureaucracy in large counties often absorbs millions of dollars before it ever reaches a teacher or a student.
That's a fair criticism.
That's why we need to structurally separate voucher funding from district funding on this receipt. Right now, those dollars are blended beyond public visibility. By creating a cleaner budget silo, taxpayers can see the true cost of the district's fixed obligations and administrative bloat versus the true cost of the state's voucher programs.
I agree that separating the silos is vital, but that leads directly to the issue of equal accountability for all recipients of those public dollars.
As it should.
Right, because right now, public district schools face intense, granular scrutiny. They are audited constantly. But if public dollars are flowing to charter schools, private schools receiving vouchers, scholarship organizations, private tutors, therapists, and third-party vendors, well, every single one of those entities must report to the exact same standard.
This means the outcomes matter just as much as the financial tracking. A receipt isn't just a list of expenses, it's a proof of purchase.
Oh, I like that. Proof of purchase.
Yeah, we need rigorous outcome reporting attached to this dashboard. We need to see graduation rates, standardized academic achievement, attendance, and withdrawal rates across all systems, public, charter, and private voucher recipients. But we also need administrative metrics. We need to see data on ESE services, which is exceptional student education.
Exactly. Because right now there is a massive accountability loophole. When a student with special needs takes a voucher to a private institution, the public has zero insight into whether that private school is actually delivering the required therapies or if the student is just being counseled out and sent back to the public system after the funding has been spent.
And that's where the Auditor General reports come in. We need public reporting on reimbursement delays for parents using these educational savings accounts.
We need it all out in the open.
We do. We need to see official complaints, and we need clear, accessible documentation when third-party providers are removed from the system for non-compliance.
Because without that outcome reporting, the 99% isn't just asking, what did we spend? They're fundamentally asking, what did we buy?
Right. What's the return on investment?
Yes. If we are funding a private education setting with public voucher dollars, the taxpayer has a right to know if that setting is delivering value. If a municipality raises a fire rescue assessment because their property tax revenue dropped, the taxpayer needs to see exactly how that assessment was calculated.
Transparency is truly the only way to build trust in an economic ecosystem this complex. Let me summarize where I stand on the core question of the 2026 property tax proposal.
Go for it.
I maintain that HJR 1F is a practical, mathematically sound, phased approach to non-school tax relief by implementing a $150,000 exemption in 2027 and scaling it to $250,000 in 2028. It provides targeted, desperately needed financial relief for homeowners facing an unprecedented cost of living crisis.
Even with the school carve-outs?
Yes, because no, it does not solve the entire education funding puzzle, and yes, it leaves school taxes in place. But protecting school funding from massive cuts while simultaneously providing substantial municipal tax relief is a balanced, pragmatic approach to a very difficult economic reality.
And my summary is that until this layered taxation system is fully transparent, any single tax cut is an illusion of relief. We are looking at a vast ecosystem spanning school property taxes, state sales taxes, lottery purchases, local referendums, municipal fees, and expanding voucher programs.
It's a lot to untangle.
It really is. By explicitly excluding school taxes from HJR 1F, the state acknowledges that the massive education burden remains firmly on the shoulders of the public. Renters will likely see absolutely no relief, and local municipalities will inevitably shift the lost revenue into regressive new fees and special assessments. Without a unified, granular taxpayer receipt, the financial burden isn't reduced, it is merely moved to another bill.
Well, while we clearly disagree on the economic mechanics and ultimate impact of HJR 1F, it is evident that we have reached a strong point of convergence today. Regardless of where one stands on the expansion of vouchers, the necessity of public school funding, or the mathematics of municipal tax cuts, the demand for clear, public proof of where these dollars go is an essential next step.
Absolutely. There is so much more to explore in the nuances of municipal finance and education funding, and, the listener will have to weigh the evidence for themselves. They must decide whether the 2026 proposal represents genuine financial relief or just another shifting of the systemic burden.
Before Florida asks the public for another dollar, another referendum, another reassessment, another fee, or another sacrifice, the state should provide a complete public receipt. Not a slogan, not a campaign promise, not another shell game, a receipt.